The storm battered Alowan's kitchen relentlessly, rain sheeting down the windows in relentless silver curtains, blurring the neon glow of Koreatown into abstract streaks of red and blue. Inside, the 24-hour diner hummed with the low drone of fluorescent lights and the faint sizzle of a dying grill. At 2:17 a.m., Zariel Reyes moved behind the counter with deliberate precision, wiping, stacking, breathing, each motion a quiet assertion of control in a life that had taught her never to rely on anyone else. Mixed black and Puerto Rican, she carried the weight of past betrayals like invisible scars. An ex who'd left her drowning in his debts, a mother gone too soon, a sister depending on her to stay afloat. She worked these endless nights not from weakness, but from fierce, unyielding resolve. The door crashed open with a gust of wet wind, admitting 3 enforcers, tattooed necks, cheap suits stretched over muscle, eyes hard with purpose. They zeroed in on Ji-woon, the timid young server restocking napkins in the back room, yanking him out and pinning him against the wall. "Short again," the leader snarled, knuckles cracking. "Boss wants interest, paid in pain if necessary." Zariel's pulse hammered, but her voice cut through clean and steady. "He's off shift. Take whatever this is outside." The leader spun, lip curling. "Stay in your lane, sweetheart. This don't concern you." She stepped forward anyway, planting herself between them and the boy. "It concerns me if you turn my floor into a crime scene. Inspectors shut places down for less." They laughed, low, mocking, advancing until the air felt thick with threat. Then, from the shadowed corner booth, Kyrell Baek rose. He moved like silence given form, black coat open over a tailored shirt, posture relaxed yet coiled, dark eyes sweeping the room with lethal calm. The name alone shifted gravity in these streets. The Korean American who ruled territories through precision, not spectacle. One look from him, and the enforcers stilled, hands dropping from Ji-woon. "Out," Kyrell said. One word, velvet over steel. They released the boy and retreated, vanishing into the rain without protest. The diner fell quiet except for the storm's distant roar. Kyrell approached the counter slowly, each step measured, his presence pressing against her space without touching it. Zariel lifted her chin, meeting his gaze head-on, searching, challenging, refusing to yield even an inch. She poured black coffee without asking, sliding the cup across the scarred wood. Their fingers didn't quite brush, but the nearness sent a faint current up her arm, a subtle heat that lingered in the cool air. "You didn't have to do that," she said, voice low, steady. His eyes held hers, a beat too long, dark and unreadable yet somehow searching, as if he was seeing past her armor to the guarded fire beneath. "I decide what disorder I allow here." He paused, studying her the way one studies something rare and unexpected. "You handled yourself impressively." She leaned forward slightly, elbows on the counter, closing the invisible distance between them by fractions. "I don't need saving, but I notice when someone chooses restraint over violence." A shadow crossed his features, conflict buried deep beneath layers of control. The weight of legacy, perhaps. A father's empire built on blood he now carried like chains he couldn't quite break. "Debts demand payment," he murmured, voice quieter now, almost intimate in the empty diner. "But not everything has to end in chaos." He set down far too much cash, bills crisp, deliberate, and turned toward the door. At the threshold, he paused, glancing back. Rainlight caught the sharp line of his jaw, the faint tension in his shoulders. their eyes locked again across the Rain Street space. No words, just the charged silence of two guarded people recognizing something mirrored in the other. Strength wrapped in solitude, vulnerability hidden behind walls. The moment stretched, electric, unspoken. A pull neither acknowledged yet impossible to ignore. He stepped into the storm. Zariel exhaled slowly, fingers curling around the edge of the counter where his had rested moments before. The warmth lingered on the porcelain cup. Her heart beat harder, not from fear, but from the dangerous spark of possibility. For the first time in years, the armor around her heart felt thin, permeable, alive with the threat of fracture. 2 nights after the storm, the air in Elowen's kitchen hung heavy with the scent of fried rice and lingering rain. Koreatown streets buzzed faintly outside, but inside, the diner felt suspended in time. Zariel Reyes navigated the sparse late-night crowd with her usual efficiency, her mind replaying that charged encounter. The way Kyrell Baek's gaze had lingered, pulling at threads she kept tightly woven. She wasn't naive. Men like him didn't intervene without motive. Yet, something in his restraint gnawed at her, a quiet intrigue that disrupted her carefully guarded routine. The bell chimed softly. Kyrell entered alone, shedding his coat like a second skin, revealing the sharp lines of a tailored shirt that clung just enough to hint at the power beneath. He took the same corner booth, his presence drawing the room's subtle gravity toward him. Zariel approached without haste, setting down a menu she knew he wouldn't need. "Black coffee?" she asked, voice even, though her pulse betrayed a faint quicken. He nodded, eyes tracing her movements, deliberate, appraising. "And whatever's fresh." She served him in silence, steak rare, no frills. He ate methodically, but his attention drifted to her, watching as she cleared tables, her form graceful under the harsh lights. The diner emptied gradually, patrons filtering out into the night, leaving only the hum of the fridge and the weight of unspoken words. Finally, as she wiped the counter near him, he spoke. "Jiwoon's debt, it's cleared, transferred to me." Zariel paused, her grip tightening on the rag. She set it down with a controlled thud. "I don't accept charity or rescues." His lips curved faintly, not a smile, but an acknowledgement. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, closing the space without moving. "Not charity, recognition." His voice dropped lower, intimate in the quiet. "You see through the noise. Stay composed when chaos threatens. I need that acuity." She crossed her arms, meeting his intensity. "As what? Your spy in the shadows?" "An observer," he corrected, eyes locking onto hers with a depth that sent warmth coiling low in her stomach. "Front of house at my club upstairs. Discreet, better compensation, shorter nights. Enough to cover your sister's tuition, and more." The offer hung between them, laced with temptation. Zariel studied him, searching for the trap. His expression remained steady, but beneath it she sensed the flicker. Conflict in a man who commanded empires yet seemed haunted by their cost. "And the strings attached?" "Discretion. You notice shifts in the room, whispers that matter. Report them to me, nothing beyond that." She didn't flinch. "If I refuse?" Kyrell stood slowly, his height bringing him closer, the air thickening with proximity. The world turns as it does, but opportunities, they rarely circle back. His gaze held hers a moment longer, dark and probing, as if daring her to see the vulnerability he rarely showed. She didn't respond that night, letting him leave with the same generous tip. But sleep evaded her, his words echoing alongside the memory of his controlled power. The next evening, resolve hardened, she rode the elevator up to the club. It was a world apart, velvet booths under warm amber lights, jazz weaving through the air like smoke, suited men exchanging nods of quiet respect. Kyrell waited at the bar, a glass in hand, his posture relaxed but alert. "You came," he said, voice carrying a note of quiet approval. Zariel stepped behind the bar, pouring his scotch with steady hands. "Don't mistake survival for submission." As she handed him the glass, their fingers brushed. Deliberate this time? The contact lingered a fraction too long, skin against skin sending a subtle spark up her arm. Neither pulled away immediately. His eyes darkened, restraint visible in the tension of his jaw, a silent pull drawing them nearer without words. She broke first, stepping back, but the air hummed with it. The beginnings of a tension neither could ignore, a dangerous dance just starting. Weeks melted into a haze of amber lights and whispered deals in Kyrell's club. A realm of polished mahogany and velvet shadows where Koreatown's elite played their games. Zariel Reyes adapted swiftly, her sharp eyes cataloguing the subtle choreography. A nod sealing fortunes, a glance laced with veiled threats. She poured drinks with poise, her presence a quiet anchor amid the undercurrents of power. Yet, Kyrell remained an enigma, always near, observing from the edges, his calm facade a barrier she found herself testing, probing for cracks. He never overstepped, never demanded more than her role required. But his gaze followed her, heavy with unspoken intent, stirring a warmth she fought to ignore. In stolen moments, restocking glasses, closing tabs, their paths crossed deliberately, the air thickening like smoke. One sweltering evening, humidity clinging like a second skin, a rival operative slunk in. Older, with a face etched by old scars and older grudges, he cornered Zariel near the service alley door. His breath reeked of soju and spite. "Tell Baek his hold's fraying. This turf ain't eternal." Zariel's spine straightened, refusing retreat. "Messages like that? Deliver them yourself." He gripped her wrist, tight, bruising. "Don't get cute, outsider. You don't belong in our world." The door swung open silently. Kyrell emerged from the dim hall, his form cutting through the tension like a blade. A few terse words in Korean, low, lethal, and the man's bravado shattered. He released her, backing away with pallid deference, vanishing into the night. The club had emptied by then, jazz fading to echoes. Kyrell guided her to a secluded booth, pressing a glass of chilled water into her hand. His fingers grazed hers in the exchange, lingering just enough to send a shiver along her skin. "You should have called out," he said, voice a controlled rumble, eyes scanning her for harm. Zariel set the glass down untouched, meeting his stare with fire. "I fight my own battles, always have." He stepped closer, the booth's confines shrinking the world to just them. The scent of his cologne, crisp, understated, mingled with the club's lingering haze. Impressive, but unnecessary risks, they tempt fate. She didn't back away, her breath sinking with his in the charged space. "And you? Hiding behind shadows, pulling strings. Who risks for you?" The question hung, piercing his armor. Kyrell's hand rose, slow, deliberate, fingers tracing the air near her cheek before gently tucking a loose curl behind her ear. His touch was feather light, yet it ignited sparks along her nerve endings, warm and insistent. Thumb brushed her jawline, hovering there, eyes darkening with a storm of restraint and desire. "You're not like the others," he murmured, voice husky, closer now, close enough that she felt the heat radiating from him. "You see the man, not the myth." Zariel's heart thundered, her hand rising to cover his, holding it against her skin. "Maybe because I know what it's like to carry invisible chains." Time stretched, their breaths intertwining, faces inches apart. The pull was magnetic, undeniable, a precipice they teetered on. His free hand braced the booth wall behind her, caging her without trapping, the tension coiling like a spring. But he withdrew first, jaw clenched, eyes shadowed with conflict. "Not yet," he whispered, more to himself than her. "Zariel," as he stepped back, the space between them aching with what wasn't said. The touch echoed long after, a promise of fractures deepening, walls crumbling under the weight of mutual gravity. In his restraint, she glimpsed vulnerability, and in that glimpse, her own defenses wavered. The club's rhythm had settled into Zariel's bones like second nature. Pour, observe, deflect, repeat. Yet every shift carried an undercurrent now, a silent pulse that quickened whenever Kyrell entered the room. He no longer lingered only in corners. He took the bar stool closest to her station more often, nursing a single scotch while the night unfolded around them. Conversation remained sparse, careful, but the silences between words grew heavier, more intimate. One quiet Tuesday, her phone vibrated against the bar during a rare lull. Her sister's name flashed on the screen. Zariel stepped into the narrow hallway behind the bar to answer. "See, the bursar called again," her sister's voice trembled. "They're threatening to drop my classes if the balance isn't cleared by Friday. I didn't want to ask." "You don't have to." Zariel pressed her palm to the cool wall, steadying herself. "I've got it, don't worry." She ended the call and returned to the bar, composure intact, but Kyrell had noticed. His dark eyes tracked her every movement as she resumed wiping glasses with mechanical precision. "You're carrying more than usual tonight," he said quietly when the last patron left and the jazz playlist looped to something slower, more melancholic. Zariel met his gaze across the polished wood. Family doesn't wait for convenient moments. He reached into his jacket, producing a plain white envelope, thin, unmarked. He slid it toward her. "Exact amount, not a gift, in advance on next month's pay." She stared at it, then pushed it back with 2 fingers. "I don't borrow what I can't repay on my terms." Kyrell didn't retract his hand. Instead, he leaned forward, forearms resting on the bar, shrinking the distance between them until she could see the faint tension at the corners of his mouth. "Then let me teach you something useful instead." His voice was low, almost conspiratorial. Over the next hour, as closing tasks wound down, he spoke to her in measured Korean. Simple phrases first, greetings that doubled as warnings, polite refusals that carried steel. She repeated them back, accent careful, memory sharp. In return, she offered him small truths: how to read a room's temperature by posture alone, how to spot a lie in a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. The lessons blurred into something else, shared vulnerability disguised as instruction. When the last light dimmed and the club stood empty, rain began tapping the high windows again. Kyrell glanced outside, then back at her. "I'll drive you home." She didn't argue. The black sedan cut through wet streets in near silence. City lights streaked across the tinted glass, painting shifting patterns over their faces. His right hand rested on the gearshift. Hers lay inches away on the center console. Neither moved to close or widen the gap. At a red light, Zariel spoke first. "Why me, Kyrell? You could have anyone watch your empire. Why choose someone who refuses to bend?" He didn't answer immediately. The light changed. The car eased forward. "Because you don't bend," he said at last. "You break rules only when they deserve breaking. That kind of clarity, it's rare." His voice softened almost imperceptibly. "And because every time you look at me, I feel seen, not feared, not obeyed, seen." The confession hung between them, fragile and unguarded. Zariel turned slightly in her seat. Her fingers brushed the back of his hand, deliberate, slow. He didn't flinch. Instead, he turned his palm up, letting her trace the lines there with the lightest pressure. Skin against skin, warm in the cool leather interior. Neither spoke. The contact stretched, electric, intimate, his thumb eventually curling over hers in a gentle hold that felt more significant than any kiss could have. When they reached her building, he parked but didn't cut the engine. Zariel looked at their joined hands, then at him. "This doesn't change the rules." "No," he agreed, voice rougher now. "But it changes everything else." She slipped her hand free, slowly, reluctantly, and stepped out into the drizzle. At the door she paused, glancing back through the rain-streaked window. He hadn't moved. Their eyes met again across the distance, heavy with promise and restraint. Inside her apartment, Zariel leaned against the closed door, heart pounding. The ghost of his touch still burned on her palm. For the first time, solitude didn't feel like safety. It felt like absence. The club's atmosphere had thickened in recent weeks, the jazz now sounding more like a warning than a seduction. Rival factions pressed harder, suppliers quietly warned off, protection payments rerouted, quiet threats delivered through intermediaries who never showed their faces. Kyrell grew more distant, his nights consumed by closed-door meetings that stretched until dawn. When he did appear at the bar, his touches, once deliberate, lingering, had become rare, almost reluctant. His eyes still sought Zariel across the room, but the warmth in them was tempered by something colder. Calculation, or perhaps fear. Zariel felt the shift like a tightening wire. She poured drinks, smiled at regulars, deflected questions about the boss with practiced ease. But inside, unease coiled. She wasn't invisible anymore. Whispers followed her now. One late shift she overheard it clearly. Two of Kyrell's lieutenants stood near the back corridor, voices low but not low enough. "She's a liability," one muttered. "An outsider. Black woman in our circle. Optics alone make her a target. He's distracted. Weakness invites knives." The other grunted agreement. He should cut ties before she becomes the leverage. Zariel's hand stilled on the bottle she was wiping. She set it down soundlessly and walked straight to Kyrell's private office. The door was ajar. He sat behind the desk, sleeves rolled to the elbows, staring at a map of territories marked with red pins like open wounds. He looked up as she entered without knocking. "Am I a liability to you?" she asked, voice calm but edged. Kyrell's expression didn't change, but his shoulders tensed. He rose slowly. "You heard. I heard enough." He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him despite the distance he kept. "You make me question everything I've built," he said quietly. "Every decision, every line I've drawn. That's dangerous in this world." "Then stop drawing lines around me," she countered, stepping into his space until only inches remained. "If I'm a risk, let me be one on my terms. Don't hide behind protection when what you're really protecting is yourself." His jaw worked. For a moment the mask slipped, raw conflict flashing in his eyes. "You don't understand what they'll do if they see how much you matter." "I understand exactly," she said, "and I'm still here." Silence stretched, taut and electric. Outside, glass shattered, sharp, deliberate. A brick or a bottle through the front window downstairs. No screams, just the unmistakable sound of warning. Kyrell moved instantly, pulling Zariel behind him toward the office door, body shielding hers as he scanned the hallway. His hand found the small of her back, firm, possessive, instinctive. She didn't pull away. "Stay here," he ordered. "No!" She caught his wrist before he could step out. "Don't push me behind walls because you're scared. Not of them, of us." He turned, eyes locking onto hers with devastating intensity. The hallway light caught the sharp angle of his cheekbone, the faint tremor in his breath. Slowly, deliberately, he cupped her face with both hands, thumbs brushing the line of her jaw. Foreheads pressed together, breaths mingling in the narrow space between them. "I can't afford to lose control," he whispered, voice rough, almost broken. "Not with you. Then don't lose me instead." His thumbs traced slow arcs along her cheekbones. Their mouths hovered, agonizingly close, lips parted, air shared, tension so thick it felt like another heartbeat. She felt the tremor in his fingers, the battle raging behind his calm. 1 inch, 1 breath. The almost kiss pulsed between them, heavy with everything unsaid, everything restrained. A second crash echoed from below, louder, closer. Kyrell, forehead still resting against hers. "This isn't over," he rasped. "But tonight, you leave through the back. My driver's waiting." Zariel didn't argue. She let him guide her down the service stairs, his hand never leaving the small of her back, protective, claiming. At the rear exit, he paused under the dim security light. "Tomorrow," he said, voice low. "We talk, really talk." She nodded once, then slipped into the night. In the car, rain beginning again, Zariel pressed her fingers to her lips where his breath had ghosted. The almost touch burned brighter than any kiss could have. Restraint had become their language, and it was speaking louder than ever. The city never truly slept, but that night, Kyrell drove them beyond its restless pulse. He took the winding road up to the Griffith Observatory overlook, closed to the public after dark, yet the private access gate opened at his quiet command. No guards, no entourage, just the 2 of them. The black sedan parked at the edge of the world, Los Angeles sprawling below in a glittering sea of light and shadow. He led Zariel to the low stone wall that overlooked the basin. No words at first, only the cool night air, the distant hum of traffic, and the faint scent of eucalyptus carried on the breeze. She leaned beside him, elbows on the rough stone, watching the city breathe. "I brought you here because there are no walls," he said finally. "No cameras, no ears, just truth." Zariel turned her head slightly. "Then give it to me." Kyrell, slow and measured, as though releasing something long held captive. My father built an empire on fear. Every deal, every territory, marked with blood he never washed off. When he died, murdered by men he trusted, I inherited the machine. But not the hunger for it. I've spent years trying to run it cleaner, quieter, less bodies, more control. But control is just another chain. He paused, fingers tightening on the wall. I tell myself I'm different. Then I look at what I've become, always calculating, always one step ahead of betrayal. And I wonder if I'm only delaying the same end. Zariel studied his profile. The sharp jaw, the faint scar near his temple she'd never asked about. The way moonlight carved hollows beneath his eyes. She spoke softly. My mother died when I was 16. Car accident. My father was already gone. Prison, then nothing. I raised my sister alone. Every bill, every school form, every nightmare she woke up crying from. I handled it. I learned early that depending on anyone meant eventual disappointment. So I built my own walls. High, thick, no doors. She turned fully toward him now. But walls don't protect you from loneliness. They just make the silence louder. Kyrell met her gaze. For the first time, the mask wasn't merely cracked, it was gone. Raw, unguarded need flickered in his eyes. I've never let anyone close enough to see this, he admitted. Never wanted to. Until you walked into that diner and refused to flinch. Zariel stepped nearer, closing the last small distance. Then stop hiding from me. The space between them vanished. He kissed her slowly, reverently at first, as though testing whether the world would collapse if he allowed himself this. Lips brushed, tentative, then deepened with quiet hunger. One hand cupped the back of her neck, fingers threading into her curls. The other settled at her waist, pulling her flush against him. She rose onto her toes, arms sliding around his shoulders, answering with equal measure. The kiss was restrained fire, controlled yet consuming, every withheld touch from weeks past pouring into this single moment. He tasted of scotch and restraint finally breaking. She tasted of coffee and unshakable resolve. When they parted, foreheads pressed together, breaths ragged in the cool air, neither spoke immediately. His thumb traced the curve of her lower lip, memorizing the shape. Her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt over his heart, feeling its rapid, unsteady beat. This changes everything, he murmured against her skin. It was already changing, she whispered back. We were just too stubborn to admit it. He kissed her again, briefer, softer, a seal rather than a claim. Then he pulled her against his chest, arms wrapping around her fully, chin resting atop her head. They stood like that for long minutes, city lights flickering far below. Two guarded souls finally allowing the other inside the fortress. No promises were spoken aloud. None were needed. The night wind rose, carrying the distant sound of sirens, reminder that the world still waited. But for now, in this suspended pocket of time, the only empire that mattered was the one they were building between them. Fragile, honest, and terrifyingly real. Zariel tilted her head back to look at him. No more almost. Kyrell's eyes darkened with promise. No more almost. Dawn broke cold and unforgiving over Koreatown, the city stirring like a beast rousing from uneasy sleep. Zariel woke in Kyrell's penthouse, spare, minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows framing the sprawl below. Last night's confessions lingered in the air between them, fragile as mist. They hadn't gone further than kisses, hands exploring boundaries with reverence, but the intimacy had stripped away the last pretenses. She lay beside him, his arm draped over her waist, breath steady against her neck. For a moment, peace felt possible. Across the penthouse windows, when Zariel's phone lit up on the nightstand. She reached for it before the vibration could wake Kyrell. A single photo. Her sister's face, duct tape across her mouth, eyes swollen from crying, background a concrete wall streaked with rust and shadow. Text beneath it. Midnight, Old Cannery on Terminal Island. Come alone or she bleeds. No Baek. Zariel's chest caved. Not panic, something colder, sharper. She slipped from the sheets without sound, dressed in dark layers, pocketed her keys and the small folding knife she kept in her bag. Kyrell slept on, scar on his shoulder rising and falling with steady breaths. She stared at him a long moment, the man who had finally let her see inside the fortress and made the choice. She would not let this become his war. She left no note. Explanations would only slow him down. The cannery stood rotting at the edge of the port, chain-link fence sagging, windows shattered like broken teeth. Rain had started again, thin and relentless. Zariel parked 2 blocks away, walked the rest on foot, hood up, steps silent on cracked asphalt. Every lesson she'd learned, from raising her sister alone, from surviving nights that tried to break her, sharpened into focus. She wasn't walking in blind. She was walking in armed with the one thing the scarred boss would never expect: absolute willingness to burn it all down for family. Inside, sodium lights buzzed overhead. Her sister sat zip-tied to a metal chair in the center of the vast empty floor. The boss, scarred cheek twitching, waited with 6 men, guns loose in their hands. He smiled when he saw her. "Baek's little secret weapon," he drawled. "Didn't think you'd actually show." Zariel stopped 10 feet away, hands visible. "Let her go. You want territory? We talk terms. You don't get to use my blood as currency." He laughed, stepping closer. "Terms? Sweetheart, this ain't negotiation. This is leverage. Baek's been choking us for years. Now he chokes on you." She glanced at her sister, held her gaze long enough to say, "I'm here, stay with me," then back to the boss. "You think hurting her makes him fold? It makes him end you. But me?" She took one deliberate step forward. "I'm the one who can still walk out of here and tell him to let it go. Redraw the lines. No more bleeding. Everyone lives." The boss's smile faltered for half a second. Then he lunged, grabbing her throat, slamming her back against a rusted pillar. Pain exploded across her shoulder blades. She didn't gasp. Instead, she drove her knee up, connected, felt him stagger. The pipe she'd palmed from the floor earlier came down hard across his forearm, crack of bone, curse of pain. Gunfire erupted. Kyrell arrived like judgment. He came through the loading bay doors with 4 of his best, silent entry, surgical precision. No grand entrance, just lethal efficiency. The first rival went down with a suppressed shot to the leg. Another dropped his weapon when Kyrell's barrel pressed to his temple. The boss spun, firing wildly. A round clipped Kyrell's ribs. He hissed but kept moving, putting himself between Zariel and the line of fire. Zariel broke free, tackled her sister's chair to the ground, shielding her as bullets sparked off concrete. Kyrell's men overwhelmed the rest in seconds. The boss tried to run. Kyrell caught him by the collar, slammed him face first into the floor, knee in his back. "Enough," Kyrell said. One word, final. The warehouse fell silent except for labored breathing and distant rain. Zariel cut her sister free. The girl clung to her, sobbing. Zariel held her tight, stroking her hair. "It's over. It's over." Then she looked up. Kyrell stood over the boss, gun steady, blood soaking his side. His eyes found hers, fury, fear, relief crashing together in the dark. "You left," he said, voice raw, without a word. "I wasn't going to let this become your grave," she answered, standing, stepping toward him. "Not for me." He holstered the gun, swayed slightly. She caught him before he could fall, hands pressing the wound, blood warm between her fingers. "I'd have come anyway," he rasped. "I'd have torn the city apart." "I know." She pressed her forehead to his, voice breaking for the first time. "That's why I had to try first. Because I love you enough to protect you from yourself." His hand found her face, trembling. "And I love you enough to let the Empire die if it keeps you breathing." Sirens grew closer. Someone had tipped the authorities. Kyrell's men vanished like smoke. He let Zariel guide him toward the exit, arm around her shoulders, her sister trailing close. In the rain outside, he stopped, turned her to face him fully. Blood mixed with water on his shirt. Pain etched deep lines around his eyes. "No more running ahead alone," he said. "No more locking me behind you," she countered. They sealed it with a kiss, bloody, desperate, alive. Rain washed the violence away while they held each other in the wreckage. The breaking point hadn't shattered them, it had fused them. 9 months after the cannery night, the city had forgotten the name Baek carried in certain circles. Kyrell had not simply stepped back, he had surgically removed himself from the machinery he once ran. Debts were zeroed through quiet wire transfers or forgiven outright. Territories were signed over via notarized leases, disguised as commercial partnerships. The men who once answered only to him now reported to a council of 3 former lieutenants who operated under strict bylaws. No violence, no extortion, legitimate revenue only. Kyrell kept nothing that could be traced back to coercion. He kept only the lounge, 2 family-style restaurants that had always been clean fronts, and a small real estate portfolio focused on affordable housing in neighborhoods long ignored. Elowen's Lounge had become something rare in Koreatown, a place people came to feel seen rather than watched. Zariel had stripped away the last vestiges of its old purpose, replaced heavy velvet drapes with sheer linen that let moonlight spill across the floor, added low communal tables where strangers talked instead of schemed. The jazz was live 5 nights a week. The bar served drinks named after songs, not threats. Her sister, now graduated and working as a graphic designer, still came in on Fridays to help mix cocktails and laugh with the regulars. The girl's nightmares had faded to occasional echoes. She slept with the lights off now. They lived in a single-story house tucked into the hills above Silver Lake. White stucco, wide eaves, a flat roof they'd turned into a private garden. No gates taller than waist-high. No cameras sweeping the driveway. Just solar lights that clicked on at dusk and the lemon trees Zariel had planted herself. One clear December morning, frost rimming the edges of the rooftop planters, Kyrell found her sitting on the low bench they'd built together. She wore his old cashmere sweater over leggings, knees drawn up, watching the sun burn off the marine layer. He sat beside her without speaking, their shoulders touching. After a long silence, she asked, "You're really done?" He nodded once. "Paperwork finished last week. The council has the final signatures. I'm out, completely." She studied his face, the faint lines that had deepened around his eyes, the scar along his ribs now pale as moonlight. No regrets? Only that it took so long to see what mattered. He reached for her hand, turned it palm up, traced the lifeline there with his thumb. "I spent years convincing myself solitude was power, that needing anyone was a death sentence. You proved me wrong every single day you stayed." "Zariel, I was terrified of needing you too. Thought it would make me weak. But staying away hurt more than any risk ever could." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. No flourish, just quiet certainty. Inside lay a thin platinum band, its surface etched with the faintest continuous spiral. 2 lines that began separate and merged into one seamless thread. "Marry me," he said. "Not to complete anything, not to prove anything. Just because every morning I wake up grateful you're still here. Because I want to build the rest of my life with the woman who taught me how to live instead of survive." She looked at the ring, then lifted her eyes to his. Tears gathered but didn't fall. "I've spent my whole life protecting what I love by keeping it at arm's length," she said softly. "You're the first person I've ever wanted to hold closer instead of push away." She took the ring and slid it onto her finger. The metal warmed instantly against her skin. Yes. They kissed there in the pale winter light, slow, unhurried, the kind of kiss that carries the weight of every almost and every restraint they'd endured. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "Small," she whispered. "Rooftop here, sunset. Our people only. Then downstairs to the lounge. Music, food, dancing until the candles burn out." He smiles. The full, unguarded smile she had learned to coax from him. Exactly. 10 days later, the rooftop held 30 chairs arranged in a loose semicircle. Sunset painted the sky in rose and gold. Zariel walked out in a sleeveless ivory dress that skimmed her body like water. Kyrell waited in a charcoal suit, no tie, sleeves rolled. Her sister stood as witness and officiant, simple words they'd all agreed on. They spoke their vows facing each other, hands joined. Kyrell first. "I promise to choose you every day, not out of obligation, not out of fear of loss, but because being with you is the only choice that has ever felt like freedom. I promise to listen when I want to command, to stay when I want to retreat, to build beside you instead of behind walls. I love you, not the version I imagined, not the version the world expected. The real you, the one who fights, who forgives, who stays. I love you forever." Zariel's voice trembled only once. "I promise to meet you in the open, no armor, no distance. To trust when instinct says run. To fight for us when the world tries to pull us apart. I promise to remind you every day that you are more than what you were forced to become. I love you, not the myth, not the power. The man who bleeds and still reaches for gentleness. The man who chose me when he could have chosen safety. I love you completely, always." Rings exchanged, a kiss that lasted until the last of the sunset bled away. Downstairs, the lounge filled with soft laughter, clinking glasses, a quartet playing slow-burning standards. They danced in the center of the floor, barefoot, bodies close, world narrowed to breath and heartbeat. Her sister twirled past with one of the musicians. Old friends from both lives raised glasses in quiet salute. Later, back on their own rooftop, city lights scattered below like fallen stars, Kyrell held her from behind, arms secure around her waist. "No shadows left," he murmured into her hair. "None," she answered. She turned in his arms, rose on her toes, kissed him once more. Gentle, certain, final. They walked inside together. The door closed with a soft click. Outside, the city continued its restless rhythm. Inside, two lives, once fractured, once guarded, had finally come whole.